Welcome, and thank you for joining us. I'm Susan Noyes, the founder and chief visionary officer of Make It Better Media Group, which includes Better in Chicago and the Bay Area, Marin Magazine, and Spaces. And we are delighted to have you here to learn about the benefits of lifelong learning. I am also a passionate lifelong learner, so I'm particularly delighted to introduce you to the three women who are going to speak. Each will present. I'll introduce one, then the other, and then the other. They will each present. Throughout the presentation, if you have any questions, we want to be able to address them after we've heard from all three speakers. So please send them in the comments section and we'll watch out for them. When the three speakers are finished, then we will have a moderated discussion. That is when they will be answering your questions. So without any further ado, I'd like to introduce our first speaker, Delia Jervier, the Executive Director of the Alzheimer's Association Illinois chapter. And by the way, a special thank you to Alzheimer's Association for being the sponsor of today's event too. Delia has served has only been with us for not very long. It's not only the Illinois division, she covers Indiana and Kentucky. She has worked for 25 years in nonprofit management, and she moved to Chicago just in June, in the midst of a pandemic, and will be experiencing her first Midwest winter. So, Delia, you have a lot to say, and we're looking forward to hearing it. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. Just testing and making sure that everyone can hear me. Really appreciate the opportunity to talk about the Alzheimer's Association today to the audience. As Susan said, my name is Delia Jervier, and I'm the Executive Director of the Illinois chapter. I also oversee what we refer to as Region 9, which includes the Greater Indiana chapter as well as the Greater Kentucky chapter. On the next slide, I'm going to start talking to you a little bit more about the association, and this will be an opportunity for you to learn a little bit more about who we are and what we do. Our organization was founded in 1980 by Jerry Stone, the founder of the Stone Container Corporation. Mr. Stone watched his wife battle Alzheimer's disease, and this gave him the vision to establish an organization that would provide families with information and support while working towards finding a cure. On the next slide, I want to share with you a little bit more about the disease itself. But before I do so, I want to talk about the organization here in Illinois. Our chapter, the Illinois chapter, has 8 points of service here in the state, serving nearly 1 million people who are affected by Alzheimer's disease, and more specifically, 230,000 Illinois residents who currently live with Alzheimer's disease, their family, friends, and caregivers. The next slide, want to share a little bit more information about the difference between Alzheimer's disease and dementia. Very often, the two terms are used interdependently, but they both mean something very separate. As you can see here in the picture, dementia represents the umbrella. It is a term that describes a group of symptoms. Alzheimer's disease represents the most common form of dementia, affecting more than 75% of total cases. Dementia is a loss of cognitive function serious enough to interfere with daily life. And Alzheimer's disease is a brain disorder, a disease that progresses over 2 to 20 years and varies considerably from person to person. On the next slide, I want to share a little bit more about how the Alzheimer's Association helps when it comes to some of the programs that we offer. One of the programs that is the most familiar and the most popular is the 10 warning signs. And those 10 warning signs are some of the things that individuals can look to determine whether there is cause for concern and whether their loved one should be taken to a doctor to discuss potential testing to determine whether indeed the person is suffering for maybe mild cognitive impairment or the early signs of Alzheimer's disease. As you will see here, one of the warning signs, the first one speaks to memory loss that disrupts daily life. We all have memory glitches here and there. I'm sure many of you this morning looking for your keys to get to your car, to drive to work, or may forget somebody's name from time to time. That is not necessarily something by itself that we should look to be concerned, but it's the type of memory loss that disrupts daily life. It's the types of things that interrupts or causes significant cause for concern. Another one of the 10 signs is confusion with time or place, or not remembering how to get to somewhere that you have been going to all of your life, needing direction, or going somewhere and not being able to find your way home. On the next slide, we want to talk a little bit about the facts and figures of the disease. Alzheimer's is a family disease. There are over 11 million Americans who provide unpaid care for people with Alzheimer's and other dementias. Caregivers who provide 18.6 billion hours of care annually. It is also a very expensive disease and has the potential to bankrupt Medicare and Medicaid. It is more feared today than cancer, heart disease, and stroke. And it's across generation. It's young people, middle-aged individuals, as well as older individuals. Alzheimer's disease is the one disease that across generation affects everyone pretty much the same. When a question is asked about what do you fear the most, across those ages, Alzheimer's surfaces to the top above cancer as well as heart disease. It currently affects over 6 million Americans. On the next slide, this is particularly important when we speak to how Alzheimer's disease affects caregivers as it relates to their emotional and physical stress. There are caregivers of many other types of ailments, but what this slide tells us is that a caregiver of someone with Alzheimer's disease is affected 59% more from an emotional stress perspective and 38% more from a physical stress perspective when we compare different types of caregiving out there. Throughout the next couple of slides, we want to talk about something that the Alzheimer's Association did this year when it comes to the facts and figures that we typically do every single year. This year, in 2021, a special report was put together addressing the specific needs of people with Alzheimer's disease and their caregivers as it relates to the Black and Brown communities. In the next slide, a couple of the things that we noticed in this particular survey has to do with things that we already knew, as well as things that address specifically people in the African American community, the Hispanic community, as well as Asian American community and Native American communities. On the next slide, we talk a little bit more about what we did. So what came out of that particular survey was that Black caregivers are more likely to provide more care to their loved one than their white counterparts, but they are less likely to take advantage of the use of respite services and taking that break. We also find that minority caregivers have a greater need for care themselves and suffer more from depression than their white counterparts. The next slide also speak to a few more of the results that we found out of this particular section of the 2021 facts and figures. Everyone is impacted by Alzheimer's disease. If you have a brain, you have the potential of developing Alzheimer's disease. We know that women are more likely than men to develop Alzheimer's, and 66% of caregivers are women. The incidence increases with age, with those 65 years of age or older at an increased rate. I'm going to accelerate through the slides a little bit as well, because I know that I don't want to take over the entire presentation. So if we can skip to the next slide, please. The reason that I spoke about the specific survey that we did for Black and Brown community, the reason that that particular survey was done in 2021 was because of the things that we went through during that particular year. COVID-19 pandemic and civil unrest showed that many institutions had to confront the longstanding issues of race and inequity. And when it comes to Alzheimer's disease, the same is true. These events have underscored for the Alzheimer's Association the importance of highlighting and addressing the impact of health and healthcare disparities in the current system. Next slide, please. What we learned is that discrimination is a barrier to Alzheimer's and dementia care. People of color oftentimes feel more comfortable with the next slide, please. So we'll speak to the survey a little bit. For the first time, the survey was done with the intent to get responses from Asian, Black, Hispanic, Native, and White Americans. In the past, the facts and figures oftentimes reflected responses from non-minority groups. And because of what was going on in 2021 with civil unrest, we found that it was necessary to speak to Black and Brown communities specifically as it related to Alzheimer's disease. Next. The survey wanted to get information, understanding, knowledge and understanding of the disease from those particular groups, access to care and support services. We really wanted to understand whether people in Black and Brown communities felt that they had access to programs and services as it related to people with Alzheimer's disease. And we wanted to find out if those individuals in those communities trusted in the healthcare providers that provided those care to their family members. Next. And it's okay for you to skip through all of those bullet points. Thank you. Ultimately, we received some significant answers from this particular survey, and I want to share them through the next couple of slides. And again, if you could skip through all of the bullets, we'd appreciate it. Thank you. This particular slide really highlights the key points that came out of the survey. One, discrimination is still a barrier to Alzheimer's and dementia care. More often than not, Black Americans lack trust in research and clinical trials and have doubt that advances in Alzheimer's treatment will be shared. It is important that people in Black and Brown communities participate in research, more specifically because we have found that more often than not, in minority and underserved communities, Alzheimer's disease is oftentimes diagnosed in the later stages of the disease. But we know that a lot of the medication and a lot of the research shows that the newer medications that are potentially coming out very soon are going to be more effective in the early stages of the disease. And that is why it is more important now more than ever for us to raise awareness about the seriousness of the disease in those minority communities. As an association, and I'm going to really fast forward through the last few slides of my presentation, I want to tell you a little bit about what we do as the Alzheimer's Association to help those families in need. Number one, we provide care and support. So if you could get to the slide where we're talking about care and support, we have staff that provide care and support through programs and services at absolutely no cost. You can call our 1-800 number, which is 1-800-272-3900, and that helpline will help answer any question that you have once you have been faced with a diagnosis of Alzheimer's. The care and support is provided at no cost to families, to healthcare professionals, and it's done by our staff as well as our volunteers. This is part of the mission of the association. As you see on the screen, the Alzheimer's Association is the one organization that leads the way to end Alzheimer's and all other dementia by accelerating global research, driving risk reduction and early detection, and maximizing quality care and support. That is what we do. The next slide also highlights our vision, which is a world without Alzheimer's and all other dementia. We provide support for care and support. We provide support through our programs and services. We also fund research. We are the largest nonprofit funder of research in the world. We also provide public policy help, and through public policy, we've been able to increase the amount of money that is dedicated to research from what was about $400 million in 6 years ago to now close to $400 billion funding research for Alzheimer's disease. And because of that, you're hearing more and more about newer studies and newer medication that are coming out to help treat the symptoms of the disease, and ultimately we hope to find a cure for the disease. So one of the final slides that we have out there will show you how our organization raises money to fund research and how we are also supporting the entire state of Illinois. So it feels like I'm rushing because I'm running out of time, but I really, again, appreciate the time, and I'm going to be here to answer any questions you might have once we're done today. Back to you, Susan.
It is now, and any questions you have for Delia, and I actually have several after that, we will circle back to after the other two speakers have presented. With no further ado, I'm so delighted to introduce you to Dr. Emily Rogalski, who is a neuroscientist and a professor at Northwestern University, as well as Associate Director of Northwestern's Mesulam Center for Cognitive Neurology and Alzheimer's Disease. She leads very innovative international studies. She's a leader in her field internationally, aiming to improve our prognosis, diagnosis, and care for those impacted by Alzheimer's and related dementias. Please take it away, Emily. We hope.
Wonderful. Thank you for having me here. I'm going to share my slides now. And it's such a delight to be here. And I'm sandwiched right in between the Alzheimer's Association and the Osher Center for Lifelong Learning that you're going to learn about and by the next speaker. And we partner with both groups. So I'm at Northwestern and at the Mesulam Center for Cognitive Neurology and Alzheimer's Disease. And that sure is a mouthful, but means that we do aging and dementia research. We're part of a national network funded by the National Institute on Aging of funded Alzheimer's disease centers. And up here, this map shows where those Alzheimer's disease centers are located throughout the country. The darker blue colors represent established centers, and the lighter blue colors represent centers that are coming on board as new centers. At our center, and at the centers across the United States, we are focused on aging and dementia and Alzheimer's disease. And our each of the different centers across the United States gets to have some personality. And our center focuses on recognizing the heterogeneity in aging and dementia. That dementia is not just one thing, and Alzheimer's doesn't just occur in one way. And so we approach this with a multidisciplinary team that's looking at what happens to our thinking abilities, what happens when we look under the microscope to understand the neurobiology of the disease, what happens, how does this affect our personal identity, how does it affect our family? And so we have specialists that are neuroscientists, social workers, neuropsychologists, and sometimes our motto we say is we cover everything from cells to social work. One of the ways that we look at heterogeneity in aging and dementia is to think about the simplified trajectories of aging. So very simply, we think about a pathologic trajectory of aging where there's accelerated changes in our thinking ability that severely disrupts our life. That's what we would think about. One example would be Alzheimer's dementia. Then there's a path to aging that we call normal or average aging, where there may be some degree of change that occurs over time, but people are able to remain active in their daily life. And then we had this idea more than a decade ago that, this doesn't really encompass the lived experience of everyone. Are there people out there who we call superagers, we put this quirky term to it, that have little or no age-related cognitive decline and remain highly functional in their later years? So you may wonder, why do we do this? Why are we studying superagers? Well, as a medical community, we've gotten quite good at extending our lifespan, but it hasn't necessarily kept pace with our health span. So people are living long, but those later years are not necessarily their best years. We think superagers represent a better balance where there's individuals whose health span better matches their lifespan. So superagers in specific are individuals who are over age 80 but have memory performance at least as good as individuals in their 50s and 60s. So this is your neighbor, your aunt, your uncle, your grandpa, who you say, oh my gosh, you would never know that person is 80. They act like they're 50. And we think if we study these individuals, we can better understand how to maximize our health span in our later years. The study of superagers also has great potential to inform Alzheimer's research, and this was recognized by the National Institute on Aging several years ago. We're redefining expectations in aging. So this picture here is actually of one of our superagers in the program. And this is a special feature that was done by the Chicago Tribune several years ago. And during the interview, this woman, one of our superagers who's was about at age 104, I think, when this interview was done, she's actually beading with really small beads and making necklaces and sharing her story with the Chicago Tribune. A little over a year ago, we got an updated picture from her when she was celebrating her 106th birthday. And just this past year, she celebrated her 107th birthday. But I really love this picture of her 106th birthday, where behind her on the wall here are a number of birthday cards. She received over 200 birthday cards for her 106th birthday. And I think that's a really proud moment. Superagers also have the opportunity to reduce stigma associated with aging. Here pictured is another one of our superagers, and in the background it might be hard to see, but those are actually penguins. So she is out and adventurous, and in this particular adventure, hanging out with the penguins. So what do we do in the SuperAging study? I told you that superagers are these individuals who are over age 80, but have memory performance at least as good as individuals in their 50s and 60s. And I like to think of it as we focus on different biologic cores. Are superagers able to maintain that memory performance over time? Or do they just have a lucky memory day when they first come to visit us? And we see that the majority of superagers are able to maintain this great memory performance. We've also shown by looking at MRI scans of the brain that superagers' brains look more like 50-year-old brains than they do like 80-year-old brains. And we're starting to understand what might allow that to happen. The ultimate gift that superagers give is that at the time of death, many of them decide to donate their brains so that we can see with greater precision what are the cellular and molecular features that might be driving this outstanding memory performance in older age. And so we do that by looking at histopathology, which is a fancy word to say that we're looking under the microscope. And we see that the superagers have less what we call tau tangles, which are a feature that are described in Alzheimer's disease, but also common in lower amounts in average aging. We also see that superagers have an abundance of a special type of neuron called von Economo neurons. And we're just starting to understand the special genetics and protective factors that might allow superagers to maintain that memory performance. That's not all. We realize that things are more complex than the biology, and so we spend a lot of time understanding the lifestyle factors. Superagers tend to still be working or are engaging in the lifelong learning activities that you're going to hear more about in the Ali lecture next, or are volunteering. Oftentimes. Education. Superagers are not just people with advanced degrees. They range in education and their family history. Some of them have a history of dementia while others do not. Psychosocial factors that we see that are important is that superagers report being more socially engaged and connected with others, and we're digging into that more to understand. So these are some of the initial features that we've seen, and we're really at the beginning of this journey rather than at the end. And I wanted to end today with an exciting new initiative that was recently funded by the National Institute on Aging. The SuperAging Study has traditionally been only located in Chicago, and we are now expanding to include 5 sites across the US and Canada. And we will be enrolling 500 superagers over the next 5 years. So I would like to thank my colleagues. It really takes a village to do this work, and would be glad to answer any other questions you might have about the SuperAging program. And if you're interested in getting involved in our SuperAging research or our other aging and dementia research, if you're over age 50, we're interested in talking to you. And if you just want to get our newsletter, you can sign up at any age. So thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Emily. Okay, I'm signing up right now for the newsletter, and I hope that by the time I reach the right age, I'm a member of your control group. This is fascinating. Our last speaker is Carol Dietz. She is the chair of the Science, Technology, Medicine, and Health area of the Osher Institute of Lifelong Learning, also called OLLI, at Northwestern University. She has a 35-year international executive career in research, marketing, and strategic planning for both corporations and as an entrepreneur. And she still finds it absolutely fascinating trying to figure out what makes people tick, which is probably why she does such a great job of pairing people and creating amazing experiences for them at OLLI. Carol.
Hello. Hello. Hi, everybody. And first of all, thank you, Susan, for inviting me. And thank you for Jennifer Wolford, my friend who introduced me to the amazing philanthropy that Better is doing. So I applaud all of your efforts. I'm here to tell you how to do what both Delia and Dr. Rogalski told you that you have to do, and have fun with it. So that's my job. And it's going to be quick and it's going to be fast. Because what I'm going to do is I am going to ask you to do a thought experiment with me, just like Albert Einstein used to do in the post office. So I want you to just think now, go internally for 1 minute and try to recall the best class you ever had. Could have been high school, college or university, grad school. What learning experience in the classroom stuck with you? Okay. So I'll give you 15 seconds. Okay, so I'm okay, you've got it, right? All right, now I want you to hold on to that one thought, whatever it is. Wish I could hear them, but I can't. And I want you to think about if you could create a university that delivered what you just thought, okay? So that's your job. So let's talk about what you might have written down mentally in the last 15 seconds. Number 1, what about a university that had no prerequisites, you don't have to declare a major, no boring lectures, no tests, no grades, just, I'm doing well, I think, right? Pretty sweet so far. And in fact, the whole range of classes would be what you wanted to study, what interested you. And you had every year 200 classes to pick from, and they revolved every year, 200 more classes. And let's take a look and think about the class itself. Would you be just doing a book group and reading a history book from page 22 to 48? Or would you have videos? Or would you have guest speakers, perhaps a podcast, a TV series, articles, anything that would enrich your learning experience? So, what about your classmates? Think about your classmates. Do you remember when you're in school and everyone was carrying, 30 hours and working 30 hours and they were sort of there because they had to and nodding off frequently? Well, these people are awake and alert, and they're also interested about the same subject you are because that's why they're there. If they weren't there, they wouldn't take the class. So all of a sudden, your discussions become very lively, very informed, and everybody does their homework. But it doesn't feel like homework because you picked it, right? Okay, so do you remember when you sat around for lunch or dinner with your friends and you were going on and on about something you were interested in, like genetic engineering to bring back the woolly mammoth, and everybody's eyes glazed over? Well, at the Osher Institute, all those people had taken that class about genetic engineering for the woolly mammoth. And so you can imagine the difference in the discussion. It's fabulous. And you can continue that discussion. You can meet after class, you can meet before for coffee, you can go out to dinner, and everybody wants to talk about what you want to talk about. It's perfect. It's really perfect. So who might be in your class? Who are these classmates that we've talked about? They are professionals with very long, distinguished careers in whatever field they were in, which is a huge, broad range, any field you can imagine. They're happy to share their experiences in a respectful way. Our motto is respect, positivity, and humor. You have to laugh at our age. So you will find that we leave our resumes at the door, but we contribute our experience. We contribute our life learning along with our professional expertise. And again, we're all very happy to be there. So what if that university was already here? And of course, you know where I'm going with this. It is here. And it's called Lifelong Learning. All right, now there are 26 lifelong learning centers in Illinois, but only 2 are Osher Institute of Lifelong Learning, called OLLI. And why is that? That's because the vision for Osher Lifelong Learning Centers came from a philanthropist and financier by the name of Bernard Osher. And this was 44 years ago or 45 years ago. And today, there are 120 Osher Institutes in every state of the Union. Now, again, those are Osher Institutes, but every state and every city may have other lifelong learning. So it's just that we're partial, and I'm here because I'm familiar with Osher. But they're not the only choice. Of course, we think they're the best choice, but they're not the only choice. So Mr. Osher was also a pioneer in integrative medicine. So the other Osher institution on the Chicago campus, the downtown campus by Water Tower, is the Osher Institute for Integrative Medicine. And they offer a full suite of services there, from massage to meditation to meditation. And that is, we don't have classes there, they have classes there. So that runs as a separate institution. But here is the best part. And the best part of all the news I've given you is that we are, and this will interest the libertarians of the 60s and 70s and maybe a few leftover hippies like me, but we are completely peer-led. What does that mean? That means that we decide what we want to learn, we build the classes individually, and then we publish a catalog, and we run the classes, by the way, and then we publish a catalog every year with 200, as I mentioned, study groups. We don't call them classes, and we don't teach. We discuss study groups. We learn from each other. And if that isn't the ultimate democracy for us, born or bred in the 60s and 70s, I don't know what is. And so what might you find in the catalog is my last question. You will find everything you could ever think of, and actually more things that you never thought of in that catalog. You can start with literature, from classics to bestsellers. You can do creative arts, photography, writing. You can study worldwide cultures. If you like British murder movies, what do you call those, detective movies, you can do that. We have physics and we have baseball. So you can do just about whatever you want. One part of our curriculum that I did want to mention is our civic engagement function. We feel that, and I think Emily mentioned this too, and Delia as well, you have to remain engaged, you have to have a purpose, you have to remain relevant if you are going to build those neural connections. And so we have civic engagement classes. We have just started a mentoring program at Northwestern University for first to college. You know, a lot of us parents didn't go and they were wondering what in the heck we were doing over there. Well, now we're working with students. So my area, as Susan said, is health, medicine, technology, and engineering. And all I can say in that area, and I would love to welcome you to our classes, that is the area that is going to fundamentally change your life through gene editing in the next decade. It's already happening. Sickle cell anemia has already been cured genetically for some people. It's still in trial. Designer babies have already been born in China. They're here. It's just that they're not tested, and so you're not hearing from them, but it's here. So there's much more I can tell you. I know we're time sensitive, so I will wind it up there. All I can say and promise you that if you want to be a star in Emily's laboratory of super agers, if you join us, you will stay engaged, relevant, with purpose, but above all, you'll stay curious. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Carol. You tied it all together so beautifully too. That's so we all aspire to avoid the issues that Delia's working so hard to fund and research and fix, and Emily is doing the researching and leading to the making great strides. I'd like to start with a question again, though, about the actual learning that you're advocating that all of us do, even if we don't have any super ager concerns yet, and maybe in order to avoid not being a super ager, if I'm saying that right. I was intrigued by the reference to the study group and the designer babies in genetics and technology. Could you talk a little bit more about how do you choose your study group? Do you have to have a particular expertise, and how does it evolve?
No, that's the best part of it. I'm an English major with an MBA, and I'm head of the science area. So if I can do it, anybody can do it, right? You do what you always wanted to do when you were in school, working, having babies, doing whatever, not the men, but fathering babies. And you do what you love. This is it. That's why the classes are so full of energy, because everybody's doing what they love. You do not need expertise. I have 4 doctors in my class right now, and they don't know anything about genetic engineering. One said to me, I'm a cardiac surgeon. You know more about it right now than I do. You know, the important thing is it's not just reading a book. It's sharing the experience with everybody else. And may I say one other thing I forgot real quick? Half or more, and Emily, correct me if I'm wrong, half or more people over 65 have some sort of hearing loss. Is that correct? Something around there? And maybe Delia, you might know. But the last I heard it, okay, so it was 50%. So what do we do in class? When we're in person, and we hope to go back in person in March, because we've been out, you know, because of COVID, we have mics on every table. You talk into a stand-up mic, just like a press conference, so you can be heard and you can hear everybody else.
Emily, could you talk a little bit more about your recommendations to avoid any kind of onset besides just, okay, go take this one class? What are the other things that you can tell make a fundamental difference?
Yeah, I don't think we're quite at the point where we have a recipe of, you know, eat 10 blueberries and do 5 crossword puzzles. But I do think there's a lot of principles that we understand. And one principle that you've heard time and time again is to stay active and engaged. So people will ask that crossword puzzle question. Will they keep me from having dementia? And what I respond normally by saying is, do you like crossword puzzles? Do you find them challenging? because our brains like things that are challenging. So if you think of a crossword puzzle and you say, ugh, that causes me a lot of anxiety and stress, then I say, please don't do that, because the stress and anxiety that doing a crossword puzzle will provide to you personally far outweigh any benefits that might be brought. But there's been really clever studies done. And one of my favorites is one done by Denise Parks several years ago, where she took a group of individuals and taught one group how to knit, and they had never knit before. Another group learned to take photography classes. So thinking about Carol and the lifelong learning and maybe learning something new afterwards. But this particular program studied the brain effects of this. And then another group like watched TV or something like that. And what they found was that the brain benefits were equal for the group that knitted and the group that learned photography. So what this tells us is it's the act of new learning that is important to the brain, not necessarily whether it is knitting or photography or learning a new language. And so this idea of staying engaged is really important. We know that a heart-healthy diet is a brain-healthy diet. These are really good things to be thinking about. We know that exercise is important, and we know that all of these things help to stimulate new growth in the brain, and we've learned that over the years that new growth is possible even in our later years.
And Emily, you've taken the words right out of my mouth, actually. When we're talking about the things that stimulate the brain, it's what's good for the heart is good for the brain. And it really has to do with the stimulation of those blood vessels that feed all of the organs, whether it's feeding the heart or feeding the brain. And, you know, it may be crossword puzzles for some people, but it may be words with friends on your phone. I mean, a lot of us live our lives on a phone these days, and there are a number of very enticing games these days that challenge the brain, challenge the mind, whether it be putting a puzzle together on your phone while you're on a long flight, now that we're able to travel again, or whether it is working that Scrabble, you know, online with friends or strangers.
Yeah, absolutely. I love this idea of, you know, it really fits with this idea of personalized medicine, right? So there's not one prescriptive that you have to do crossword puzzles this way or that way. We know that social interaction and engagement is so important, and that there's the negative consequences of social isolation and loneliness. And that doesn't mean necessarily that you have to have 50 friends. For some individuals, it's having one or two close friends. Other individuals really thrive by having that strong social engagement, but maybe not knowing everybody as well. And so picking out those activities that resonate with you, I think are really consistent with that idea.
Mental, physical, social. You've given us great tips. And by the way, I'd love to see a list of some of those games that you recommend for seniors on the phone. There are some great comments and questions coming in, and I would really like to give Carol an opportunity to address this one. A woman who is named Carolyn Golden, who is in Marin County, says that she goes to the OLLI program out there and she loves it. So could we connect to the other programs across the country? Are they run the same?
Well, Bernard Osher's value system was based on independent learning. And so of the Osher programs, of which there are 120, one of those is in Marin County, they are independent. Everything about Osher is independent. Like I said, we're a bunch of libertarians. And so each area plans their own curriculum and their studies just like we do, but there's no teachers, although some of the Oshers do have occasional lectures. So everything's okay with Osher. That's what I really like. But we also, this is kind of interesting, had a study group just recently with Cambridge in England, because it was an economist class and they were talking about world affairs. And so I thought, we wonder if we can get some people from Osher, from Cambridge, which is not actually even a recognized Osher community. And we were able to talk with people with wonderful British accents about Brexit. So anything's possible with Osher. I do want to mention that Northwestern is the seat nationally, called the National Resource Center. So we have, in addition to the Osher Institute at our university, we also house the director for the National Institute for Osher Institute Resource Center. So all of the Osher Institutes have a conference every year, and all of them share through Northwestern what's going on. So we're kind of on the pulse.
Fantastic. There's a wonderful comment from Dee Dee Kern, who says, as the manager of a community education program at New Trier Extension, one of the very rewarding outcomes is seeing individuals come together, learn new skills or improve old ones, and engage with others. Wherever the program is, there are great benefits. And I think that that's really important. So it's not just Osher's. It's, New Trier is just our local community high school that offers amazing extension opportunities. And those are available, I'm sure, in communities across the country.
Yes, and actually, if I just may add, there's a directory online. I can send the link out. The Osher Institutes put out a directory of all learning programs that they know about. So there's 26, as I mentioned, in Illinois. There may be more, but that's a nice start, to find out. And a lot of those are suburban.
So that's a wonderful opportunity to remind the audience that we will be sending out the video of this. And if there's any other questions you have, send them to us immediately, as quickly as you can, and we'll get those answers. And now we'll make sure that we include that directory that you referenced, or anything else that Emily or Delia think is important to get to you. I noticed, this is really a Delia question. I noticed that Lewy bodies is a form of dementia, and I am glad to know that Alzheimer's is actually, you're raising funds to research and try to solve all forms of dementia. And Robin Williams was from the North Shore of Chicago and made Marin his home. And sadly, he died of Lewy body in Marin. So, could you talk a little bit more, because that was not even well known as a disease before that tragic suicide. You're on mute.
That is the one statement that I think we hear the more now. It's you're on mute. You're on mute. That and move the slides faster. But we have those slides, and we'll make sure that you guys get a copy of those for those who weren't able to see some of the information that I was sharing. As you mentioned, Susan, yes, Lewy body is one of the forms of dementia, and so is Parkinson's disease. We do talk a lot more about Alzheimer's disease, but there are a number of dementias out there, such as the two that I just mentioned, as well as vascular dementia is another form of dementia that we don't often talk about. And that affects more often than none people when you hear about diabetes and there being a correlation between having diabetes and dementia, it's more often than none vascular dementia that's being talked about. There's still a lot of research that needs to be done around Lewy body. It is definitely a much more complex form of dementia that we're learning more about every single day. But because Alzheimer's disease affects 75 to 80% of the people who have dementia, we know a lot more about Alzheimer's than we do about Lewy body. But a lot of research is being done in that area as well. Absolutely.
So what other resources does the Alzheimer's Association provide to those who are affected by a disease?
There's a number of things that the association will do and will provide for families. One of the things that we do with those families is certainly we can be the first stop, the first stop once you are being given a diagnosis, right? Whether it's a parent or a loved one or a spouse. They call the number oftentimes because all they've been told is depending on where they got the diagnosis from. If it's not from a place like Northwestern University or some of the, the areas that are specializing in treating a patient with Alzheimer's disease, they may hear this for the first time and have no idea what to deal with this. It may be because it's the first time they're hearing about it, because there's no family history. So we help with care planning. The first step in understanding, number one, the disease, understanding what are some of the things that the family needs to start thinking about, depending on what stage of the disease the individual is facing, whether it be mild cognitive impairment or the early stages of the disease or the middle stage or the early stage. We as an association can help answer the question of what's next. Where do we go? Can you refer us to a specialist? Who do we talk to if we're further on in the disease process and the family can no longer care for their loved one themselves at home? Then you can call and find out, okay, how do I identify a facility? What questions do I ask if I have to put my loved one in a facility so that they can be cared for better? They're starting to wonder, what does that mean? And what's happening, and why does it happen towards the end of the day more often? And so what is sundowning? You can call our helpline and there will be a live person there any day, all day, any time of day, including holidays, answering the question. You won't get for English press 1 or 2 or Spanish press 2. You will have a live person at all times. And those services are available at absolutely no cost. We do programs and services, education. We help caregivers better communicate with their loved one. We have people who call simply to vent because they're having a bad day and they're tired, or they've been taking care of their loved one all day, and they want an ear just to listen to them vent about what their day has been like. And that's what the Alzheimer's Association is there for as well. We provide support groups at no cost in English and Spanish. We have, in the state of Illinois, we have support groups in Chinese, and so various languages are addressed through those support groups that are absolutely free of charge to caregivers. And many other things. I spoke about respite and taking care of yourself as a caregiver. More often than none, caregivers are so busy taking care of the loved one that they don't take the time to take care of themselves. And so as an association, we remind caregivers that it's important for them to take care of themselves as well. But we're there for the caregiver, and we're there for the person with disease as well. There are what we call early stage support groups for those individuals who are in the earlier stage of the disease so that they can come together and interact with each other. We also have support groups for men who are caregivers because they have very special needs as a man who is a caregiver of a loved one. And we also provide support groups for members of the LGBTQ community. They also have very special needs. So a variety of things that the association provides at absolutely no cost to people in the community.
Wonderful comments coming in, and they remind me of the power of the internet. We have someone in Chattanooga. We have someone who logged on late and said, "Where do I sign up to be a SuperAger?" And someone else who said, "Will I get a recording?" Yes, you'll get a recording. Anything else you want to know, put it in the comments and we'll follow up with that. Carol.
Yes, just to add to what you were saying, Susan, the pandemic, for all of its horror, had one very positive effect on Osher, and that is that 70% of our classes went immediately virtual. And once we got over our trauma of, trying like every, am I going to get in? Am I going to get in? We relaxed and we enjoyed it. And now, even though we prefer to be together physically, because that's part of the excitement of the classroom, we now have probably, our estimate is about 30% of our classes will remain online. So we call it Ollie Anywhere. And just back to what you were saying, if you're a snowbird and you want to go to Florida, you can take Ali with you. Just take your computer.
Wonderful. And Emily, do you want to talk a little bit more about volunteering to join the SuperAgers and what people can do to start learning about it early?
Absolutely. I think that there's a link that's now been put in the chat, and that's the best way to get engaged with us. There's a phone number there, or there's a registry you can join. And if you're not quite over age 80, we still want to hear from you. There's lots of different studies at the center that we have. Some of those are for individuals who are healthy. Some are for care partners. Others are for individuals who may be experiencing some memory decline or may have a diagnosis of dementia. Some of them are what we call observational studies. So these are studies where we might ask you to come back year after year, or just for a single visit, depending on the study. And that's what the SuperAging Study is we're asking you to come in and answer some paper and pencil questionnaires, and we'll ask you to participate in an MRI scan, things like that. But then there's other studies that are called clinical trials, and these are trying to better understand what are the effective medications that might help an individual with a diagnosis of dementia. And then there are clinical trials that are non-pharmacological in nature. And so those might be providing, for example, I lead one where we provide speech language therapy, and we do that over the internet. So thinking about pandemic times, we started this before the pandemic, but it sure did come in handy when COVID came around, the idea that you could meet with an expert clinician over video chat. And get that care from the comfort of your home. So we're really trying to think of ways that we can be innovative and meet the needs of individuals. So if you have any interest at all, we would love to hear from you and invite you to join our registry.
I would like to use this as an opportunity to talk about the power of philanthropy. Donating $1 to the Alzheimer's Association. I hope you'll donate way more, but you end up funding research like Emily. Osher, as we heard, was started by a philanthropist. It's Better is built on and has blossomed so that we are connected across the country, because we always go back to philanthropy and trying to connect the best resources to an audience who's able to support them. From that perspective, I would love it if each of you, we only have about a minute and a half left, if there's one more thing that you want to say to our audience before the event ends.
I would just say winter is a great time to test your foot, or you test your, put your foot in the water at Osher. It's a 4-week session. The registrations are on an annual basis, but your first semester is a test semester you can take. So you don't have to join for a year, just one semester. Start with winter. There's right now going to be 40 classes because winter session is smaller. Spring and fall have 60 to 70 classes. So good time to start, and you can do it virtually. All of Ollie's winter classes are virtual. Thank you for that shameless plug, by the way.
And Emily, we want a shameless plug for supporting your work every way we can.
Oh, thank you very much. So, the best way you can support is come and be a part of it. Of course, we have philanthropic opportunities as well, but we really want you to engage with us. We have educational programs as well. We partner with great places like the Alzheimer's Association in the research that we do, but also in the support groups that we offer. We have clinical care and research kind of tied together, and bring unique educational programs too. So we invite you to engage and just appreciate the opportunity to be a part of this event today.
Thank you for bringing so much excellence to it.
And
Delia.
I just want to thank you and thank Better for the support of the Alzheimer's Association. And I want to invite anyone that is interested in being engaged with us. We're always looking for volunteer leaders, individuals who are interested in joining our boards, our committees, and who want to be a part of helping us further the mission of the association as a whole. If you're interested in being involved and getting engaged, we are always open and looking for volunteers.
Thank you. Again, thank you to the three of you for contributing your valuable time and expertise to this event. Thank you to everybody who logged on and joined us. Your time and attention are valuable. So we are honored that you shared it with us. We are happy to follow up, and we will follow up as we promised. Please stay engaged with Better and Marin Magazine by subscribing to our Better letters, by going to our social network and following us. You will see if you go to our website, you will see that we have robust resources to help you with whatever it is you're working on in your lifestyle, or ways for you to give time, give things, give support too. That's it for now. We look forward to hearing from you. And thanks again for everyone for joining us.
Bye. Thank you.